Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss literature before Chaucer. What does this mean? Was there literature before Chaucer? Because we all may have noticed that in every history of English literature book, it all begins with Age of Chaucer, right? Was that mean there's no literature before Chaucer? Literature suddenly began with Chaucer? Let's find out in this video. Early historians made a sharp division between Anglo-Saxon and New Speech English. According to them, they believed that New Speech English actually evolved from the union of Norman French, which happened after Norman conquest in 1066. That's very important. So they believe there was a sharp division between Anglo-Saxon and New Speech English. But modern writers did not recognize this sudden break or a sharp division. They believe that growth of language is a slow process, it's a continuous process. They believe English is a Teutonic language, that is German origin. Yes, it is German origin, and they don't notice or consider this break between or division between Anglo-Saxon and New Speech English. And for this purpose, the term Anglo-Saxon is dropped and the term Old English is used instead of Anglo-Saxon. So if Anglo-Saxon is regarded as the earlier form of English language, then if the literature existed in Anglo-Saxon, that is considered as earlier form of English literature or Old English literature. So yes, it all didn't begin with the Chaucer suddenly. Okay, if literature existed before Chaucer, what are they? A large amount of Anglo-Saxon poetry has survived till now, and one among that is the epic. It's very famous, Beowulf. The author of Beowulf is unknown. Its origin is still debated. They believe that it probably began with oral ballads among English ancestors in Denmark and Sweden. These ballads, oral ballads, not written, oral ballads, were brought to England by invaders. You know what is ballad? Story through a song. So, Beowulf was also brought to England by invaders, and it was shaped into an epic, possibly by a Northumbrian poet around 8th century. This Beowulf has got pagan plus Christian elements. What is pagan? Paganism is worship of Germanic gods. They believe in many gods. A belief in fate, glorification of war, strength, and loyalty. These are all present in Beowulf, as well as since it is written by a Northumbrian poet around 8th century. Northumbrian poet is a Christian writer. So Christian ideas also present in it. God, divine justice, moral judgment, all these appear. So it's a mix of pagan plus Christian elements. Okay, what is the story of Beowulf? In Beowulf, Beowulf is the hero. In Beowulf, the Danes are the people of Denmark. King Hrothgar is the king of the Danes. He is ruling Denmark. The monster Grendel terrorizes Hrothgar's Danish kingdom for 12 years. Beowulf, a hero, who is not a Dane, comes from Geatland, modern South Sweden, to help Hrothgar. So he kills Grendel, the monster, who was torturing Danish people for 12 years. Then he kills Grendel's mother, who tried to take revenge on her son's death. And finally, as a old man, Beowulf fights with a dragon and he kills that. But when fighting with the dragon, he receives a fatal wound. So more like a tragedy now. So it's one of the famous epic you all must know, Old English literature. The other important Anglo-Saxon poets or Old English poets are Caedmon. He is a 7th century poet connected to Whitby Monastery. According to Venerable Bede, Caedmon suddenly received a gift of poetry through a divine vision. Before that, he would resist singing in public. But after getting divine vision, he wrote poems, mostly biblical phrases, dealing with the creation and the fall, Exodus from Egypt, story of Daniel, etc. Later scholars believe that some of the poems attributed to Caedmon are by his imitators. Caedmon's poems were printed in 1650. It is also believed that Milton took ideas from Caedmon's poems for his Paradise Lost, but there is no proof for it. The next important poet is Wolf. He was born around 720 or 730, 8th century poet. Like Caedmon, earlier he was a wandering poet, but Caedmon denied singing in public before getting a divine vision, whereas Wolf is not like that. He was a poet, but wandering, pleasure-loving poet. Once he got a religious vision, then he turned into Christian themes. His important works include Christ, Eileen, Juliana, etc. The themes of the Anglo-Saxon poetry were mostly religious and serious in tone. Uh, it does not mean only religious and serious. It also had love for adventure, war and heroism, story of martial spirit. They were present. And one example for that is Battle of Brunaba, written in 937. Later it was translated by Tennyson. Very important, please note. So another feature present in Anglo-Saxon poetry are love of the sea, reflecting English characters. The form of Anglo-Saxon poetry, if you want to talk about, is Anglo-Saxon poetry did not end with rhyme. See, if you take any poem nowadays, any poem, it will end with rhyming words. At least here and there will be rhyming words. But if you go to Anglo-Saxon poetry, that is Old English poetry, it does not end with rhyme. Then how it is called as a poem? It uses alliteration. Another figure of speech you might know as a literature students, alliteration. Alliteration is nothing but repetition of same starting consonant sounds. And Anglo-Saxon poetry has got two divisions in each line. Each line will have two divisions. The first division will have two stressed syllable and the second division will have one stressed syllable. All the stressed syllable begin with the same letter, same starting consonant sound. So that is alliteration. Let me give you one example from Beowulf. Grendel Gorgon, God's a bear. In this, the two divisions are, the first division is Grendel Gorgon, first division. The second division is God's a bear, second division. Now if you look at this keenly, Grendel Gorgon, G, two stressed syllable in the first division, and in the second division at least one stressed syllable, God's a bear, God's, G. It is stressed. See, all the stressed syllables begin with the same letter, G, consonant sound, alliteration. So this is the form of Anglo-Saxon poetry. Okay, we are talking about poetry. What about prose? Prose did not develop much and it does not have literary beauty those times. It is only important historically, but it doesn't have literary beauty to discuss about much. But still we can talk about prose present in those times. When we want to talk about prose, we also wanted to here mention the very important King Alfred. His period is 849 to 901. He played a major role in developing English prose. He is the first one to use English systematically instead of Latin. He translated important Latin works in English. His famous translations are Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History. Another important prose is Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It is the greatest work of Old English prose. It started earlier than King Alfred started to organize process, but it became very systematic under King Alfred's guidance. It continued, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle continued until 1154, ending with King Stephen. Okay, in the beginning we were talking about sharp division between Anglo-Saxon and the New Speech English. So the division exactly, according to earlier historians, they believe it happened after the union of Norman French. When did it happen? After the Norman conquest in 1066. After the Norman conquest in 1066, French became the language of the court, it became the language of administration, it became the language of nobility. Latin was already there. It also remained even after Norman conquest as a language of church and learning. Okay, what happened to English then, or Anglo-Saxon English? It was pushed down to the level of common people, that too only as a spoken language. So as a result, English was struggling to survive as a written language. It almost stopped for about 150 years. So this is why Norman conquest 1066 is very important. Because of Norman conquest, French is given importance and English was pushed down. So 150 years English was struggling. Then how it revived? There is one interesting story behind it. We have to talk about King John here. King John played a major role. How he is very important here. King John, during his reign, he was taxing people heavily. He was ruling unfairly. He was punishing people without proper law. So people who had a strong hatred towards French or the courtiers who were using French, they all joined together to fight against the King John. Anglo-Saxon and French came together. People who were talking Anglo-Saxon and French came together against the royal. They made a pact or a written agreement, Magna Carta in 1215. What is this Magna Carta is about? The Magna Carta or the written agreement is about the king is not above the law. People cannot be imprisoned, punished, deprived of property without lawful judgment. Some basic rights and freedoms were recognized. So barons forced King John to accept Magna Carta, and King John have no other way but accept Magna Carta. Magna Carta is important because this united Normans and English against the king. It helped to create a sense of national unity. Though they were speaking different languages, they came together. So it indirectly supported revival of English language as well as literature. So French did not end here. It continued, but English started to develop. Gradually it gained its importance, historical importance. English literature also gained new material from multiple cultural sources. People started to translate works from other language to English. The first major work of the revival is Layman's Brute. Layman's Brute is the history of Britain. Even to write a history of Britain, they wanted to take a source from French, Wace's French Brut d'Églitaire. They have to take also from Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of Britain. They took sources from this. This Layman's Brute had stories, begins with Aeneas. It traces British history through Brutus, ends with Cadwallader, the last native king. Layman's Brut is very important because it showed three influences: Celtic, French, English. Celtic, legendary material, all the stories they believe in is from Celtic, actually, the native people. French, the taste and occasional rhyme, all these were derived from French. English, Anglo Saxon alliteration method were also derived from this. So it had got three influences. The another work, major work in this time, this revival time, is Armulam, written in 1215. It is written by Orm, a Lincolnshire priest. It's a series of metrical homilies. It does not have rhyme or it does not have alliteration, but it is linguistically a valuable one. Then another major work is Anchor and Rival, written in 1225. It's a prose treatise. It is written for three women entering religious life. Author is unknown. Then another important work is The Owl and the Nightingale, written in 1220. It's a dialogue poem. Two birds debate their merits. This work is very important because this work exactly dropped the Anglo-Saxon alliteration form, and it started to use French end rhyme. At present we use rhyming words, no? Owl and the Nightingale as the work which channelized English poetry into a major stylistic shift by using French end rhyme method. The other 14th century works before Chaucer were Robert Maying's Handlings written in 1303, Ain Bite of Invite, written in 1340, Cursa Mundis, written in 1320. These works are mostly religious, didactic. What is didactic? Advising or meant to teach moral. So it is not considered as a great literature. So these are all the literature present before Chaucer. Okay. So yes, there were literature present before Chaucer. Then why in every history of English literature book we start from Chaucer, age of Chaucer? Why? There is a reason behind it, because English before Chaucer is difficult, very difficult to understand. That is Anglo-Saxon language is very difficult to understand. Caedmon's or Kinniewolf's language is not like Chaucer's. Even Chaucer's is difficult to understand and read. Yet we can recognize few words because Chaucer's has got a lot of phrases, strange words, idioms, but still it is recognizable. Whereas Anglo-Saxon poems and prose were very difficult to read. It has to be dealt like a foreign language, learnt like a foreign language. Only then we can understand the content. So that is why Chaucer is important. So literature did not begin suddenly from Chaucer. There were literature present before Chaucer, but we started considering from Chaucer. We actually see Chaucer as the real beginning because that is where we easily connect from. So what are the elements that made prepared ground for Chaucer? Gradually, Anglo-Saxon gradually absorbed French influence. It moved from alliteration to rhyme, verse to prose. So this is the place where Chaucer becomes very important. Also, another important point I have to include why Chaucer is important. A law passed in 1362 declared English must be used in law courts instead of French. So this is the victory for English, complete victory for English. From this, many French stories were translated into English. Even before that, many translation happened, like we discussed about Layman's Brut, etc. But from here, English people wanted their own literature. So many French, Latin, Italian, other sources, literatures were brought to England through the translations. English had not one, it is not unified. English existed as various dialects: Northern English, Midland English, Southern English. Each dialect had many small varieties. So there was confusion, which is the standard form of English. This confusion existed at the time. East Midland English became slowly dominant among all these dialects. How? Because East Midland English was spoken in London, the capital city. It was also used in Oxford and Cambridge, centers of learning. And Chaucer chose East Midland English for his writing. Because of his influence, this dialect gained prestige. It became the national language of England. What was just once a provincial dialect became a standard English later. And that is why Chaucer is very important. And for this purpose, we call Chaucer the father of English literature. I hope you understand this video. Let's discuss more about English literature in my next videos. Thank you.